Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Jeffrey Halstead, DMD. Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram. One.com. I'm Josh Durso, and this is FLX Today. This morning, we are continuing our series previewing local elections through conversations with candidates who will be on the ballot in November. David Shields is running for Farmington Town Board. David, thanks so much for being here. Let's start with this. How are things in Farmington from your perspective?
No, that's a very good question. I honestly got into this race because as I was talking to you earlier about my daughter, it was my wife and I actually found out that she was pregnant almost a year ago in September. And so that was full of excitement. But then a month later, actually, we got a letter in the mail telling us that the water was contaminated with a product or a contaminant called THM. Now, I'm not going to even try to pronounce what it actually is, but I know it's a mixture of it's organic matter and chlorine mixed together. But in high consumption, it can cause cancer, birth defects, and miscarriages. And obviously, reading that when you just found out that your wife is pregnant does not make you, thrilled. So I was kind of mad that, thinking that the town government essentially let this slide, and they one, had this happen, but then two, notified us several weeks, and almost actually even a month after they knew about this incident. So we drink water constantly. So I don't even know how much water was through our system, and I just didn't really care for that. And so I started to think of ideas like, wait a minute, we live in the 21st century. We have other ways of implementing information or transmitting information to residents. I mean, you look at school districts and they have this automated voicemails when there's an incident at school or if there's a holiday. Why can't we have something like that? So that's why I want to implement, an automated voicemail or texting or email. The town can also reach out to these different newspapers or websites to let them know, hey, by the way, if you live in Farmington, you may want to be careful with your water, So that's what got me started thinking about running. And then, of course, in April of 2023, another letter came in the mail stating the same thing, although the language was a little later this time with health effects, but I wasn't really buying it. So I knew that I made the right decision to truly run and to make a difference, a positive change in Farmington.
What has been the feedback been so far? What are the issues that when you're talking to folks in the community, when you're knocking on doors, what are the issues that seem to be front of mind for folks who live in Farmington right now?
Yeah, no, exactly. So one of the big things is the water issue. I know several people on my committee, they're all drinking water bottles, and that's saying something because we're all on a Democratic committee, and so we don't like plastic. But here we are, trying to, we recycle, but, we got to drink bottled water, and my friends, they're doing the same thing. Some other people have concerns about some of the traffic patterns around Farmington. Some people are like, I keep seeing Farmington on the news with accidents. Can we do something about that? I'm not really sure what to do. I know some person said that we put too much salt on the road, but that's more like a, New York State thing. But nonetheless, I like hearing different opinions from people. So it's kind of a variety of different things. And another issue, though, too, which is one of my priorities is, the lack of businesses in Farmington. I know every time I go to my meetings within the community, excuse me, they keep telling me I have to go to Victor or Canandaigua to go out and eat, but there's no good food in Farmington. You have about 5 choices, and that's it, or if you want to go to a boutique, there's none out there, it's just very limited. So I think a little bit of diverse businesses is something else that is a issue with residents.
I'm glad you brought that up because the perception, I would say across Ontario County as a whole, or even the Finger Lakes for that matter, is that Farmington's growing, and per population, it certainly is growing. But to the point you just made, it's a little one-sided in terms of what it is. It's a lot of housing growth and not a lot of other things. When you think about economic development, as far as like a strategy goes, especially with the county really putting an emphasis on housing, what kind of predicament do you think that creates for a future Farmington Town Board to try and balance growing businesses, kind of trying to create a bit of a more business-friendly climate, and also being basically the hub of housing in Ontario County?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a huge plate for Farmington. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I know they're constructing houses, and I know there's not enough housing in Ontario in general, and I know they just issued the whole assessment, like of well, how can we have more houses and what kind of houses. So I filled it out. I did my duty, but yeah, I don't know. I just think Farmington definitely needs to step it up with the different businesses around here, because I, for one, think that if you truly want to attract people to come and have it stay in Farmington, you need to create businesses to make home here, because I think people, there's a certain narrative that Farmington is a drive-by town. You either drive by it to go to Canandaigua or you drive by it to go to Victor, which is sad because I want people to come to Farmington and stay in Farmington, get a bite to eat, go shopping, do something. And I'm not saying you got to make Farmington into Henrietta, and that kind of comparison, but I do think there could be more options. And unfortunately, I don't think the town board is really focused on that. I think, they're just trying to, maybe they got too much on their plate, just trying to find enough, housing issues to, make sure everybody can live there, I guess. I know right now they're contracted with a home development company, which I don't even want to say their name, but, they're only building houses that are $300,000, $400,000, each. And to me, they're not obviously bad, but it's not healthy, I think, for the long term for families like me, who I just got married a couple of years ago, and now I have a child. I can't afford, almost $500,000 for a house. That's why I was very grateful to live in a little subdivision of Farmington where it's pretty reasonable. But that is kind of dying around here, and I really hope that the town board can kind of look into that and find out if we're going to really attract people long term. We got to figure out some new infrastructure for affordable housing, as well as businesses that will help our sales tax and our revenue.
Not only that, but I would assume attracting a younger demographic, which is kind of important to this long-term vision, long-term health for any of these communities in the Finger Lakes. You touched on the housing price component a little bit. I'm curious, when you, from a philosophical standpoint, when you think about the Finger Lakes region being tourism-centric and being basically wedged right in between Greater Rochester and Canandaigua Lake, everything that's going on there. Is there a bit of an economic viability issue with something like housing being so out of step with what a large portion of a tourism economy's jobs actually generate?
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of confused about the question. Do you mind kind of breaking it down a little bit more? I'm sorry.
Sure. So one of the pretty common criticisms that we hear from folks who watch a lot of the economic development news that we see across the Finger Lakes is say, well, the types of jobs that are being created are customer service jobs. They're hospitality jobs. And you just pointed out the issue with housing. $300,000-$400,000 house. If you're working at a couple breweries or a couple is working at a brewery and maybe a hotel, there's no chance they're swinging that $300,000 or $400,000 house, right?
Right.
What do you think what would you like to see as someone who's, I'm assuming I'm going to take a liberty here that you're not 40 years old. What would you like to see towns like Farmington do to kind of be part of the change and move that in a different direction?
Yeah, no, okay. So thank you for that clarification. Yeah. So for me, I think with like that one home development company, I think there's not a whole lot of competition. So I want that company to compete to build more, houses where people, if they want to work in tourism, then they can at least afford, a cheaper version of a house. And that's where I'm also, want to create more local like businesses, like entrepreneurs, so for people to create boutiques or local restaurants around Farmington, so they can afford houses, and I don't know exactly know who really is really buying those $500,000 houses. I'm a little jealous, honestly, but I don't think that is a good long-term strategy if you really want people to thrive in a town that is like we're talking about, that you want to attract younger generations. People will go somewhere else, and they will. And I know Farmington is, technically growing, but it doesn't have to stay that way. And if we don't change our ways now, it could diverge, before we know it, before it's too late. So that's what I want to, listen to people, their ideas, and I want to, create, this, like I said, like competition with just different businesses and different, housing companies to do it, which is interesting though, too, because I know the current board right now, they all kind of like champion the whole competition narrative, but so far I don't really see it, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fair. So let's talk about that growth issue, because it's very interesting that whenever we solicit questions from readers and listeners, that growth is always central. And I always wind up with a half dozen or so that say something to this effect. Farmington has grown too much too fast over the last 15 years. And being 33, I can see it. I can see where Farmington has grown pretty aggressively over the last decade and a half. What do you say to those folks who feel like Farmington has become a bit of an expressway in Ontario County and not as much a community as maybe some had hoped it was, or maybe just becoming less rural, given that it is a feeder to Canandaigua and Victor at the very least?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I've definitely heard that complaint a couple times. The next door app, that's what everybody's saying too. It's too busy for its own good. And I totally understand that. And I think, there's definitely a healthy balance between environmental sustainability and economic development. I would say, in my own personal opinion, that the board right now is focused more on trying to, build houses, but they're also doing it only in one part of Farmington, where I think you can definitely see that growth is explosive, because every time you drive by it, there's construction trucks, there's, more and more trees down. And so sometimes when I wake up, I'm like, oh, that's new, it's right across the road. So I don't know if they're truly focusing on the balancing. And that's where I think my experience can kind of come into play there, because I am part of the Farmington Conservation Board, as well as I am a member of the Farmington Chamber of Commerce. So I have my foot in both doors, if you will, and I know the importance of both matters. But, you don't necessarily need to destroy every single tree in the way in order to build businesses. There's a lot of, buildings that you can kind of, I don't know, divide up. And there's certain areas that have already been sold to Farmington that you could do something with, and I definitely can see why people miss maybe kind of the very rural aspect of Farmington, especially if you grew up here, as an infant to an older person. But, I just think as a way to stay competitive, especially with other neighboring towns, we do have to kind of up a little bit of our game, just a little bit, because I do think there's a lot of people that are just kind of spending their time, money, and energy in different portions of Ontario County that I think we're kind of missing out on a long term, and which, and in that case, then we have to resort to, having like large corporations come in. And that's one of my issues is with the town board, is that they are very easily gung-ho on issues regarding like fast food restaurants and gas stations and banks. The kind of the same mantra opening up again. And that's another issue that I've heard actually knocking on doors as well, is that they're just like, it's the same thing over and over and over again. And I can give like a quick example, is that Tops, for example, in Farmington, and I have nothing against Tops, but they just got permission to build another gas station in Farmington. And I'll tell you what, it's a 2-mile radius between 5 other gas stations. And I know, like I said, we're growing, but I mean, I don't think we need 5 gas stations all in the same strip. And I think I can have a lot of people that agree with me on that. And same thing with banks and fast food restaurants aren't going to keep a lot of that money here. And that's one of my issues, is that, when you buy burgers at McDonald's or Burger King, that money really goes to the headquarters in another state. It doesn't really stay located in Farmington very long, even if it's franchised. So, I think we should definitely prioritize local businesses as much as we possibly can. And that can be done through a couple different, ways. I mean, one topic for me would be you can create a certain like tax incentive for them, possibly for like a 5 year plan or something where they have a lower tax rate. That way, they've been there long enough, they can start generating a profit, and then they can start paying on the property tax or whatever taxes that they need to pay on. Or we can also, I would say, integrate the Farmington Chamber of Commerce. They can also update. They can honestly create a whole new page of all the businesses that are in Farmington and highlight the ones that are excelling or ones that opened up, or the business of the year, or employees of the year, or something like that. And same thing with the town website. We can also do something too with that. They can you can create like a little advertisement of like a mom and pop shop right in the corner there, and people who click on the town website to go on a meeting, they can kind of see, Zoe's Ice Cream, they are open until 9 p.m. or something like that. They're like, great, I'll click it and I'll go there. So these are just some of the issues that are floating through my head that I would love to enact once elected as town board.
You mentioned conservation, which I think is really interesting, because one of the questions we didn't get as much this time around, but we have gotten it plenty in the past, involves concerns around solar fields, solar growth, farmers leasing out fields to solar developers. Obviously, there's benefit to solar. I think Farmington is interesting because it's such a blank canvas in a lot of ways. So there's more opportunity there, right? What's your feeling on how the town has handled incoming solar thus far, and what would you change, if anything, looking forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would say in general, the town doesn't really advocate for a lot of feedback from the residents. They kind of do their own thing and hope it doesn't cause any sort of emotion. So, which I don't appreciate, because I really believe that residents should know everything that's being passed and everything that's going on step by step. Post it on your social media, post it on your website, make it as transparent as possible. I know there were issues in like 2018, 2019 with the solar farms coming in, and people had a lot of concerns with them, causing noise and, like an eyesore or I don't think light pollution, but anything like that. They're just another issue was that some people were concerned if that energy would be used in Farmington or if it would be across the board in New York State. And I think those were all fair feelings and thoughts. I'm still in favor, I think, generally of solar panels. I think they're essential for New York State in general, and I would be happy if Farmington, I don't know, I would say took its part and had some land for those. But I do think hearing people's concerns and maybe find ways to mitigate those as well. So if you can find quiet solar panels, or if you can tuck them away somewhere else where it's not like near anybody's property, there's ways to do it. But I don't think the town board, I don't know, they don't care too much to hear people's opinions, unfortunately, in my past experience, going to these meetings, being part of the Farmington Democratic Committee, and showing up and with my team, and just like it's a certain tension there. So I'm hoping that I can kind of be the change maker with that. Yeah. I want to make sure that when I'm on the website, I want my phone number, my personal phone number. So if people want to contact me and let me know their thoughts, I'm happy to hear them, text them, call them, email me. I really want to know their thoughts, because that's how I become a better town board member, a better citizen, when I know what everybody else is thinking.
And my last question for you, we talked about it a little bit in the beginning, but I'm curious. You have a young family, and now you are making the choice to run for town board. Why did you choose to remain put in Farmington? It's your chance I want your elevator pitch on Farmington.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely do love Farmington. I've lived here a couple years, and I don't know, we've honestly fell in love. We've been in the Finger Lakes for many years, and we always drove past Farmington, and something just always felt home, or like it was always nice. So when we were, house looking, we found a house here, and we, just like, okay, we'll make the jump and we'll move here, and we love it because, one, I think everybody here in Farmington is very nice. You're very close to the expressway, so you can go to the city if you have a job there, or to, some business down there. Canandaigua Lake obviously is very, close by, but also you can kind of get away from some of that hubbub and, recline back into your, recliner or your porch or whatever, and just like relax and take a load off, see the birds, see the squirrels, hopping around. So I always just felt compelled to live in Farmington, and it is definitely a struggle running a campaign with a young family, or with a daughter, and being newly married, because I'm trying to juggle my career and being a good husband and a good father and trying to run. It is definitely a lot, but also I felt like it helped me expand extensively to push myself beyond my expectations. And I feel like I've really grown in so many different ways, just talking to people, being confident in the way that I try to come off to people, and just being a better listener too. I've heard so many concerns from people where maybe back in the past, I'm like, I'm not really sure, but now I'm like, oh, well, tell me your thoughts. Even if I disagree with you, I want to know why you think the way you do. And I think my wife appreciates that too, because I think I brought that home.
That's awesome. Where can folks learn more about your campaign, or what's the best way to contact you for anybody who's interested that's listening?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I do have a Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, at David Shields for Farmington Town Board, Instagram at David Shields for Farmington. And then you can just find my email on there as well, which is votefordavidshields@gmail.com.
David, appreciate the time. Thanks so much for taking it today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh. It's a pleasure.
That'll do it for this edition of FLX Today. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this one, check out the show on your favorite podcast platform, or subscribe to the FingerLakes1.com YouTube channel. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.